I'm Veronique Mead with Tumbling the Stone, a chronic illness blog. Hi, everyone. Today I want to tell you that I'm changing the name of my blog, and I'm going to give you 9 of the reasonings and part of how that fits also with the focus of my blog. So, the first thing is that it's really about more than chronic illness, and I was noticing that when I was looking at other chronic illness blogs the other day, that I needed to do something that helped clarify what my focus is. And so my new blog name is the Chronic Illness and Trauma Studies, and it's really about how life events alter genes and why it's not in your head. That's a huge point I want to emphasize with my blog. The other thing are the studies. That's a big passion of mine. I really want to be identifying the literature and other people's research in chronic illnesses of all kinds that support how it's about number 3, life events, and how these actually change how our genes function. And what the research is showing is that even though we tend to have predisposition through our genes for certain chronic illnesses, most people never get a chronic illness unless there are certain interactions with environmental events. And there's been a lot of research in environmental events, which are things like diet and exercise, but it's also things like infections and immunizations. And with the focus on my blog, number 4, it's really about trauma. And trauma, like other life events and other environmental factors, actually alters our genes. Our genes stay the same, but it's the function that changes, and that's through the process of epigenetics. And so my focus on trauma is to share the literature showing that it's not all about psychology. The effects of trauma include psychological effects like post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, but that is not what causes chronic illness. Chronic illness, from everything I've been studying in the past 15 years, is actually a separate, its own effect from events that occur that can be traumatic. And also what we're learning, especially in recent studies, is that trauma doesn't have to be the overt, life-threatening event that we've come to think of, whether it's a natural disaster or serving in the military in a war or experiencing abuse. There are also really subtle experiences most of us would never even think of as traumatic. And these events can actually stimulate subtle perceptions of threat at a nervous system level in our brains in ways that mark up our genes and alter how we respond to stress, but also respond to life events of all kinds. So that's something I talk a lot about on my blog in some of past posts, especially recent posts, but it's something that's an ongoing process as I write blogs every few weeks. Number 5 I've mentioned is just a huge emphasis, is just that if you have a chronic illness and a history of trauma, it doesn't mean it's psychological. And so point number 6 is I decided to include the name trauma, even though it's a really loaded term, in part because I want to explain and provide other information that is kind of hard to find out there. But I wanted to include it also because a lot of people with chronic illness have a history of trauma and have trouble finding information that validates this, especially validates it as not meaning that it's in their heads. And a lot of these folks have had a traumatic event that triggered their chronic illness, whether it was a car accident or a really stressful period of losing a job or caregiving for a few years, and who have had an experience of trauma in childhood, such as the loss of a loved one or abuse. And that kind of integrates with point number 7, which is that a lot of folks who have a chronic illness, myself included, have no clear sense of trauma in our pasts. But something like losing a parent in childhood can actually be on that spectrum of an event that can be traumatic, even if we don't think it's that big of a deal, or it tends to happen to other people too, so it's not something we may have categorized as traumatic. But there are also all sorts of other events we never think of, don't realize, and that have happened earlier in life that the research studies are showing affect risk for chronic illness. And so part of why all this, or part of how all this comes together, is the really good news. And that's that we have been learning how to heal the effects of trauma. And even if something happened years or decades in the past or way back in childhood, it's still possible to heal those effects. It's not a quick fix. It's not clear if you can heal everything, but a lot can really change. And I've seen that in my own personal experiences, in my own life, and with the improvements I've been having with my own chronic illness. And so that's really point number 9. The whole purpose of my blog is I think it offers hope and new tools, because the links that show up as how life events alter our genes and affect our risk for chronic illness, to me it really suggests that healing the effects from those life events, however obvious and overt or subtle they are, may really have some important impacts in helping us heal our chronic illness. So I'll be writing about all those things ongoing on my blog. Sign up, get blog posts, and comment. I'd love to hear what you think about all this, what resonates, what you think about the blog title. Until next time.